I have to say, of all the things that you've reported on since we started, this is by far the most extraordinarily worrying and frightening. Let's just paint the picture. The Al-Quds hate rally yesterday in London, the march that was banned from being a march and allowing people to spew hatred and have horrible placards. It was allowed to take place because there was a legal loophole, which is static. Static is not a march. You went down there. We saw on the footage earlier banners saying boom, boom, Tel Aviv. We had that vile Bob Villain guy shouting death to the IDF. And the police, Samara Gill, did absolutely jack, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the very G-rated version of what happened. It was one of the most violent, horrific, scary events I've ever been to. That's why I take offense to your comments, because I genuinely feel like I risked something yesterday going there. It was absolutely horrifying, the amount of Islamic extremism that was out on the streets, taking over London like that. I genuinely cannot believe the amount of people, thousands of people with signs of the Ayatollah, basically kissing him in some regard, like kissing the signs, you know, worshipping this absolute death martyr to no degree. And I was getting constantly mobbed by groups of Muslim men trying to film me, trying to intimidate me. It was one of the scariest things in my life.
Because they knew you were reporting, so yeah? Yes,
and they knew we were from Talk because we had the branding. We subsequently had to take the branding off to protect ourselves. It was horrendous. And someone who wasn't making it very easy for us was this so-called pseudo-organization called the Islamic Human Rights Commission. Let's just take a look at what they were doing to help the free press yesterday.
I'm talking to her. I'm not talking to you. No. The British is the statement. If you want, if you don't mind, can you can stop taking the interview right now? You can do it from the inside, please, if you don't mind. We're just doing that to make sure. We're from the organizers. So that's up to her.
What? Anyway, this is the day we're opposing the continuous genocide of Israel, Britain, and USA in Palestine. The defenseless people, babies, genocide, being killed in hospital, and these people, they the flag bearers of democracy, look what they do. And Iran, 20,000 people being killed by America and British bombing. All of them.
Excuse me, we're the press, so we're going to get the police involved if you think...
I think is a good statement. Anyway.
That's the Islamic Human Rights Commission. Where are the police? We need to get the police. Get the police quickly, because he's going to...
I'm gonna report as an evidence.
Okay. They are with TalkTV and this.
I have to say, sweetheart, I didn't realise that you'd gone through such intimidation, and fair play to you, but I know that getting...
That's the small part of it. It got much worse. I got mobbed by 20 people. It was horrific. It shouldn't have gone on. And exactly what you said, Jeremy. Where were the police? I was screaming out for their help. No one wanted to help us. The only person they did arrest was the Boom Boom Israel guy. I actually witnessed that, but but his skin color is white, and I think that they felt comfortable doing that, but I don't think they felt comfortable when there were people saying F Israel. You know, there were people asking, are you Jewish, to one of our Talk reporters, as if it was some sort of intimidation tactic.
The thing for me is, and I hate the fact that as a young woman you've been put in that position, but I know that it's important for you to bring these stories. You talk about the police.
And I felt safe, by the way. I've had all the training, you know.
Yeah, can I just point out she's terrifying? You should see her in the office. Men cower when she walks down the corridor. But on a serious note, you talked about the hypocrisy of the police. That Bob Villain. I mean, the sheer hypocrisy when he did what he did at Glastonbury, death to the IDF. Nothing happened. The same yesterday. But I want to try and put it into context, because we're in a... And for people who think this is us being anti-anything, it's not, right? I believe, as Samara does, I think I can speak for her in free speech, but this was a hate rally. This saw Jewish flags being burnt. This saw placards, as she said, kissing the face of a man who sponsored global terrorism, who delighted in massacring his own people. If we don't call this out, and I tell you what I wanted to bring to your attention, Samara, is this morning in the news, and this is what happens. There's a university study. Did you hear about this? 20% of university students in this country now refuse to have a Jewish housemate. This crap on our streets is it's going to have an impact. And I keep telling the story about my friend whose kids still cannot go to their Jewish school on the bus in their Israeli blazers. This country needs to deal with this, but it won't, as you say, because it is terrified about upsetting a certain section of our population. That is totally wrong. Violence and hatred is violence and hatred, whatever your religion, whatever the colour of your skin, isn't it?
Completely agree, Jeremy. And look, I mean, Britain prides itself on tolerance, but tolerance should never mean tolerating extremism. You know, the fear that these ideological conflicts from overseas are now being imported onto the British streets is here. And yes, there were a lot of young people there, a lot of young people who did not know what they were chanting, what they were doing. As you say, there were children, you know, it was some sort of family fun day out, people getting their children to hold pictures of the Ayatollah and thank him for all that he's done, those comparing the Ayatollah to the Pope. And surrounding them, this Islamic Human Rights Commission, which was constantly interfering with us trying to report. They were also trying to interject other other right-leaning organizations like we are. And, you know, these attempts to silence journalists, they raise groups, sort of questions about groups like this. I just want to get a call to your attention that organization who tried to stop us actually took £450,000 of money through gift aid. So that's taxpayer funded. And that was given via the government to that Islamic Human Rights Commission, which is the oddest name for an organisation.
An Islamic Human Rights Convention that takes money from the British taxpayer, actively encourages a hate march and abuses and threatens a young female reporter who, yes, of course, you said it, that's what you do. But even
I do want to
still,
stress I was totally fine, but I wasn't expecting to go as a journalist.
But I think the feeling that you're saying, the feeling of intimidation, the feeling of, you know, you were stepping into something you didn't feel sure of, is disgusting, because I keep coming back to it, and I apologise, I'll be told off later for ranting, no doubt. It goes, it's so one way. It is absolutely so one way. And when Starmer put his 6,000 police from nowhere on the streets of Southport after those awful murders, everybody was far right. Where were the police yesterday? This is a hate march. This is spewing hatred, and it is having an impact, which is what that university study. Have you heard the story about the Gales Bakery today, Samara?
Yes.
I mean, just for people waking up, The Guardian this morning has been quite rightly accused of using anti-Semitic messages to describe the opening of a Gales Bakery, which was apparently funded 25 years ago with somebody with connections to Israel. An act of heavy-handed high street aggression against Palestine because there's a Palestinian cafe 3 doors down. What are we doing?
We just need to be so careful, because I think we're almost at the end of this slippery slope, where we go into very dangerous territory. I mean, in Nazi Germany, Jewish bakeries were pinned with the Star of David, and people were told not to go there. And, you know, they had their windows smashed in and they were boycotted. That famous word that now we use. This is really dangerous now. Zio Bakery is what Gales is being called. It is completely unacceptable. And the whole, like, sort of just to zoom out a little bit about this whole thing, these are foreign wars that are not fought on our soil, and that thanks to Keir Starmer we've actually got barely anything to do with. So I really don't understand why we've imported this absolute mess into the country. You know,
well, because we've got no bloody border control, that's why. And that's the
Totally.
And that's the irony, that it's okay to come here illegally and basically stand on our streets and spout terrorism and spew hatred against the Jewish community, and our police do absolutely nothing because that might be viewed in a bad way. Well, try explaining that, Starmer and Mark Rowley and Sadiq Khan and every other left-wing bugger who doesn't seem to grasp what the people of this country are feeling, because there is no doubt that the silent... They've had enough, people, Samara. They just don't understand it. Here's a man who I believe will probably agree with me as to the Met Police's response yesterday and the overall brainwashing of children. We say a very good morning to a man who's been across this country like, I mean, extraordinary tourism. Peter Blexley, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
I'm not very well this morning. Did you see any of Samara's work yesterday?
I saw a lot of the journalists' work yesterday down at those both those static protests. But let me just say something, and I don't care if this gets me banned from your station forevermore. Mel Stride and you, in that segment before the break and the traffic, both bottled out of using the word Muslims. That's who people are afraid of upsetting, Muslims. Well, let me tell you about the faith of Islam in its very worst incarnations. It is the Iranian regime. It is the Taliban in Afghanistan. And there are people that were at that protest yesterday who share that ideology, who would want to see it on the streets of Britain. But Phil, the contributor we just heard from, was right in one regard. The lunatic lefties, who are absolutely hypnotised and overtaken by this Islamic ideology at its worst, are incredibly naive. And this is just what happened in Iran in 1979. All the lecturers, the universities, the progressives, they helped get the Ayatollah in. And what happened the minute the Ayatollah was in? He dispatched the lot of them. And that's exactly what would happen. Heaven forbid it should ever happen over here.
Listen, I'll always take criticism from you, but I've used the word Muslim repeatedly and I wouldn't hide away from it. I was the first person to say when I interviewed that police detective chief inspector up in Rochdale after the grooming gangs thing, and I said, why didn't you deal with this quicker? And he said, because I didn't want to upset the British Pakistani community. But I take your point, and I absolutely take your point. For me, it was an orgy of hate. It was an orgy of hate that is spewing stuff across our streets that is fundamentally wrong. And I'll ask you a question, because I've said this until I'm blue in the face. Why you, like me, would hate racism? You've got plenty of Jewish friends and you've got plenty of Muslim friends like me. Why is it that in this country now, Pete, racism is seen is only about the colour of his skin? How not the absolute degradation of the Israeli race? My friends kids still can't get their bus in their blazers. How is it that thousands of university kids are saying 20% of us don't want to have any sort of Jewish housemate? How is that not being policed? How is that not as bad? Because if the boot was on the other foot, all hell would break loose, wouldn't it?
It's replicating the Nazis. That's what it's doing. I was driven home last night in a cab by a Muslim. I had my hair cut on Saturday by a Muslim. Generally speaking, decent kind of fellas. But if push comes to shove, we've had figures out recently that says 75% of moderate Muslims would happily live under Sharia law in the UK. That's the scale of the issue that we're up against. And last week, when Steve Reid stood up in Parliament and announced his new regulations in regard to Muslim hate speech and the such like, in other words, backdoor blasphemy laws. Well, where's the special regulations for Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Jews? Where are they? It's not happening. People are afraid to tell the truth. This government is in hock in many, many parts of this country to have its MPs elected by the Muslim bloc vote. And people are not standing up and telling the truth. I'm not talking about spreading hate. I'm talking about quite simply telling the
Couldn't agree with you more. You look at Gorton and Denton, and they actually had the rug pulled from underneath their feet, because there's no doubt multiculturalism in Labour's view has worked. Many other people would say that it hasn't. You think about Gorton and Denton, that was sectarian politics at its worst. Hannah Spencer, not one mention, Pete, of anything environmental, no tree hugging or nothing. All she talked about was her Muslim friends and her trans siblings, which is exactly what she said in her parliamentary opening speech. Where do we go, mate? Seriously, we've got the Metropolitan Police saying they're now investigating. 12 arrests were made. There is utter hatred on the streets. If when you look at it now, at your age, we're a similar age, where does this end up seriously without... And I have to say this, because we try and do both sides because it's important. It's really difficult to report on this stuff, right? Because you're going to be accused of anything. I'm not talking about being anti-Muslim. If you say too much, you'll say, what are you advocating? People taking to the streets? I don't know what I'm advocating, but I'm telling you here and now, the great British public, the hard workers, they ain't going to swallow this for much longer. Somebody's going to give.
I'll tell you what I'm advocating. I'm speaking confidently on behalf of millions of British people. The first census taken after I was born in 1961 discovered that there was 21,000 people identifying as Muslim in the UK. In my lifetime, that has now swelled to over 4 million. People find that very, very concerning. They find it deeply concerning when people go onto the streets like they did yesterday in support of a murderous regime that in recent weeks and months has murdered tens of thousands of its own people.
Yep.
We do not want a Taliban in the UK. We do not want an Iranian-type government in the UK. People are scared of it. And if you look at my social media feed over the weekend, you will see where I posted Muslim clerics espousing hatred and things that are entirely contrary to the very values that we hold dear and that we treasure.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that. My question was, what do we do about it? Because there is absolutely no doubt. Let me ask you a direct question. Do you think there are too many Muslims living in this country now?
I think we have a big, big problem, as is borne out by MI5 and MI6. 75% whose workload is Islamic fundamentalists, terrorists who would blow you, me and every member of your audience off the face of the earth. That is a problem. Anybody who denies it is absolutely off their rocker. We've got a big, big problem with Islamism.
What do we get? How do we deal with it, mate? What's the answer?
Firmly, effectively. We don't let any more refugees into this country. We don't let any more boats into this country. We know that many of those people get straight off those boats, fall into the clutches of Islamic charities, thereafter convert and become part of the problem, not the solution. We need somebody who's going to stand up for this country, somebody who's going to protect the values, the traditions of this once great nation and not let it slide ever more rapidly towards being Tehran or Kabul.
Mate, I agree, and you know, we've done all sorts of work together and we think about what could come next, but we seem to have become a country of complete apologists. And you know, I was looking at what happened with ICE in America, right? And I was listening to Reform saying detain and deport. Do you think this country would swallow what Nigel Farage has said he'd done, seriously, to get people who shouldn't be here out of this country? What do you think would happen? Do you think there would be demonstrations on the street? What would be the response of those very people who created that orgy of hate yesterday?
The Guardian reading lentil munching, blue-haired people from the Cotswolds, of course, would throw their hands up in horror and would object to it. But I wouldn't, and nor would millions of other people. I
bet you're waiting with bated anticipation because we have a press conference outside. Where is the press conference? Outside or inside, pal, with Keir?
It's going to be inside, but so I need to dash in about 5 minutes' time to go in there. Otherwise, it's a cut-off.
No, don't worry. So the PM will hold an emergency press conference where he will set out support for energy bills with targeted support for pensioners and wait for it benefit claimants. That'll go down like a cup of cold sick, won't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there's two things there. You know, Keir Starmer clearly at the moment is seeing the impacts on the cost of living at home of the war in the Middle East. Clearly, the Strait of Hormuz still closed to most shipping vessels, and therefore it's just totally choking the oil supply coming from the Middle East round to countries like the West. Now, yeah, you're right. I mean, like, I think the centerpiece of this announcement today is going to be about heating oil. Not many houses use it. It's big in Northern Ireland. It's probably going to cost about tens of millions of pounds to cap that, because unlike normal energy prices on the gas grid, heating oil is not actually capped. So I'm sure we'll get something today. And then I think we're waiting to see what other targeted supports towards the poorer households that entails. I think that there is a view, thank goodness, inside government that we can't actually afford any more massive energy bailouts, the sort we saw in COVID, or the sort we saw in the aftermath of the Russian invasion, just because it is, we are so far in debt now as a country that, tens of billions more is just something we can't afford.
I know you're in a hurry, so very quick question. Ask him this if you want to, I'm sure you won't, but say to him, if I'm 120 billion in debt, I've been doing this all morning, and yet in my garden is 120 billion, why am I going to leave that there and still be in debt? I don't understand why these people won't drill when they know there is a valuable, basically something we own that would rid us of all of this pain and misery, Jack.
Yeah, Ed Miliband coming under massive pressure here. He's clearly one of the leading eco-crusaders, not just in the country, but in the world. And we seem to be really out in a limb in this country. The fact that we have these massive resources in the North Sea, but Ed Miliband has made the decision not to actually renew any fresh new oil and gas drilling licenses. And so, that is something which he's not only coming under pressure in the UK domestically, but also from the president as well. Every time the president picks up the phone to Keir Starmer or makes a public pronouncement about the UK, you can bet your life for the fact that he's always going to say, you have this massive, rich revenue right off your coastline. It's called the North Sea, but at the moment we seem to be neglecting it rather than actually harvesting it.
And just final thing, and the point that really annoys me is we won't drill, but we'll buy it off Norway who've drilled out the same thing. So environmentally, it makes no sense. I mean, I picked up on this story literally to Christian sort of Saturday. Yeah. Big thing in the Daily Mail that Queen Camilla told her friends, or a friend, when Harry started dating that vile woman, Meghan Markle, that she'd brainwashed Harry. This is what is said in a new book by Tom Bauer, who's going to be on the show later this week. I don't think that is probably anything different than most of us believe, is it?
I think it's confirming what all the rumours that are out there. It's yet another. There were a lot of people who were aware that Harry many people thought Harry was not suitable for Meghan or vice versa. And because, as William said, it was moving too fast, didn't give it time, and people were very suspicious of what was going on here. And Camilla, I think, is just in this book verbalizing what many people think. And Harry's lost many of his friends because she wanted to control everything about his life. And I think that's the problem. It's only confirmation of what we've heard over the years about what people of Harry's circles of friends. And that's why he cuts quite a lonely figure when you think he's in California. I hear his friends are not overly welcome to go and stay there. He's got a small group of, maybe her friends. But when you think there's quite a large expat community in California of Brits, of maybe reasonably similar backgrounds, no one's going to be like a prince, but you know what I mean. Yeah. They don't even get in touch with him because there is a strong expatriate community, British community over there. And I know for a fact that they don't reach out to him, and we vice versa, because she's got total control over him.
I mean, I said this from day one. I used the word something whipped. I think this is a spot-on story, and I think it's only going to end one way. Just also, I mean, to be honest, Andrew Loney, I saw you on another show as well talking about this, that this whole Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor thing, which just gets worse and worse by the day, rightly has sort of involved Fergie, but the daughters are also a bit, because I haven't spoken to you about this. I missed you last week at Cheltenham, but I remember initially when this story broke saying, what a vile woman Fergie is, taking her daughters to see Epstein in New York when they were 6 and 8. They were 18 and 20, and a lot is being said now that they are as implicated as their parents. Apparently, according to insiders, Beatrice can't stop crying and Eugenie has her head in the sand. And the King, you might know more about this, is quietly distancing himself from Andrew's highly strung daughters, and things, we're told, could get a lot worse for them.
Well, yes, and their parents' actions, they've been drawn into this. And if you think about it, Fergie encouraged them to go there. But
why didn't they say no at 20, Belly? You'd know if somebody was a convicted paedophile, you wouldn't go.
It's quite, yes. Most of us would think, well, what the heck's going on here? But, you know, maybe there was pressure from mum or whatever, you know, because if you read those emails, she was desperate.
Yeah.
And it was almost like her children were a means to an end in this case. So there is I have a degree of sympathy, but, you know, they can't, it's the parents who've made the mistakes ultimately. If they've been drawn into it, it's going to be very difficult for the king to completely distance them from themselves, but it will be for them. That's Beatrice and Eugenie. Well, very hard on them, but it's as a result of their parents' actions.
Well, Loney will say that they've had money, they've used contacts in the Middle East, and that they are implicated. I don't know. Just quickly, because I'd love more time with you, but page 9 of the Mail today saying this proposed state visit by the King to America is becoming more and more problematic. Can you give us anything else on that, Belly?
I think that it is, because for Trump is now trying to say all the NATO allies want support. It's getting very political now, and people are standing away from, and certainly in Europe, of what's going on with America and Iran. And so for the King to go there, and we don't know how this whole thing is going to play out. And if it's still going on and we're not at the forefront of helping Trump, then it's going to be a very uneasy visit. So while they are, it's on the main reason for going is celebrating 250 years of American independence. But at the moment, the political tensions between Whitehall and Washington are pretty intense. And the King may be told, I'd rather you not go there because of the political, because that's part of the process, is the soft politics of the King. And I would suggest Keir Starmer and his government wouldn't necessarily want him to be going there. But it remains to be seen whether that will be the case.
Short and sweet, a bit like yours and my career compared to the rest of your family and mine. But it's always great to have you on. Do you want to say good morning to Poppy? Have you met Rupert Bell?
I haven't.
Rupert, what would you put on the front of a banknote? Because this man says, Neil, rather than having rats on our banknotes or Churchill, what about a true English rose, Poppy?
Oh, my goodness.
He's obviously deranged. What would you put on the front of it? You're an ex-military man. What would you do?
Well, something to do with Britain. Shakespeare might be a good start. I don't know whether he already is, but I live near Stratford-upon-Avon.
He used to be in the 90s.
Yeah.
Now, listen, this was a bit of a talk exclusive. This is extraordinary. You're just going to go but I mean, this needs talking about. Dozens of police officers, and we've done a sort of, Rick's done one of his great jobs. The Talk investigation has uncovered a shocking plan of poor discipline and dereliction of duty across several police forces in England and Wales over the last 3 years. Dozens of police officers have been caught watching porn, playing video games or pretending to be at their desk whilst they should have been keeping our streets safe. 18 officers, Pete, and staff face misconduct hearings after being accused of accessing porn, inappropriate material. These figures were obtained through the Freedom of Information request. At least 11 were fired before they could be sacked, or resign before they could be sacked. It doesn't surprise you, that, does it?
No, and across the country, the numbers are even bigger. It all comes down to, well, a couple of things. Number one, a lack of discipline. The D word has almost become a dirty word in some aspects of policing, because people think that they have the right to think freely and do what they want when they're in an organisation such as that. Well, actually you don't. You have to do what you're told. But also there's working from home that has crept into policing unbelievably. There are detectives working from home, and we wonder why crime rates are so low in terms of detection. It's absolutely ludicrous. So the management, the supervision, it's all failed. They need to reinstill discipline and get people back into police stations. That's if they can find one open.
But this is the reason I wanted to do this today. To me, that sort of sums up what you've just said about this country, not just under this government, but where it's gone to. You have police stations that aren't open. You have senior policemen and women who, in your words, and you've told me enough times, are too busy climbing the greasy pole to actually care about providing the very service that they were put on God's earth to do, which is to protect the public. We have zero visibility of policemen and women on the streets. And you taught me something years ago, which is the way that you deal with crime is to get intel from the local community, and that's the way you deal with people. None of that. And you're right. I told you that story years ago about how a mate of mine's dad was a copper. He did 30 years on the beat. He loved it. And he left and finished because he told me, I used to be, if an old lady got burgled, right, and they smashed into her house or broke a window, you'd go round there, you'd mend the window, cup of tea, make her feel good, 4 hours. That was your job. Now you fill out a computer form, probably from home. Nobody gets to see a policeman. You get a crime number, and that's it. And that feeling of the police being around, irrespective of this, is prevalent and sums up where we're at, doesn't it, as a society?
It certainly does. But the current breed of senior police officers will tell you that they're all doing brilliantly, and this is the way forward, and this is modern policing, and that anything that was done in the past, well, they threw that out. They threw the baby out with the bathwater in so many regards. But I've got friends and family that work in the private sector, and I've got friends and family that work in the public sector, whether that be the NHS, education, and the such like. And there is such a stark difference between the private sector and the public sector, which of course covers policing. We really need more people from industry, from business, to get into the public sector and start shaking it up, to start making people realise that public service doesn't mean self-service. It doesn't mean that you're going to be paid as a police officer to sit at home on your laptop, booking your holidays, watching porn or playing games.
How can you police an area by sitting at home with a bloody computer, whether you're accessing porn or booking your holidays or not? How does anybody, whether they are trying to climb the greasy pole or not, how does anybody think that makes sense and that deals with, you know, increasing crime numbers? It can't.
Exactly. And how do you dynamically react if some information comes in from one of your informants on the phone that there's going to be a robbery in an hour or 2 hours, and you're sitting in your home at your laptop many, many miles from the manor that you police? It's absolutely ludicrous. They need to reinstill discipline, get some order into the place. They also need to pay the rank and file police officers better than they do, but then perhaps you'll get some more goodwill and you'll get a better police service.
You'll love this. There's another story in the Daily Mail. Police chiefs pledge era of openness to the public to combat misinformation. Oh, he's looking round the room. They are. Oh. They're going to be more open, the police bosses. Yeah. Yeah,
well, I'm old enough to remember. You know that famous revolving sign outside New Scotland Yard?
Yeah, I love that, yeah.
Yeah. Once upon a time, the Metropolitan Police put on there open, honest and transparent. They're just reinventing the wheel. They're just saying what they said decades ago. It's complete nonsense. We don't need slogans. We don't need press releases. We need a police service that from the very top down to the front line serves the public and not itself.
So we need senior police officers to get their noses out of the sort of promotion trough and give their officers the ability and the confidence to go out and police on the street. Is this working from home because everybody suffers from anxiety and you need to have a more balanced lifestyle? I mean, there's you. You were like the Sweeney, you used to catch people and bang them up.
I would just like to commend and thank you for the line that you came out with, your penultimate line, about senior bosses getting away from their desks and supporting the front line. They need to support the front line, but they don't these days. They throw them under the bus at the earliest possible opportunity. And this is why policing is so fractured. It's why morale on the front line is so bad. It's why a huge majority of frontline cops are looking to leave. They can't retain police. They can't recruit good police because the management, the senior bosses are, quite frankly, idiots.
I've got 50 seconds. It's also true that police are going to be encouraged to disclose an arrestee's nationality in case it prevents false rumours. Yeah.
Yeah, well, of course, the data should be collected as to somebody's nationality, their ethnicity, their faith. All that needs to be properly recorded and made public so we can make a judgment call and governments can make judgment call on where resources need to be deployed and who needs to be stopped from coming into this country.
It's in today, page 10 of The Sun. Trevor Kavanagh writes, World War III may be coming. How can debt-ridden Benefit Street Britain hope to survive it? Trevor, a very good morning to you. Welcome to breakfast.
Good morning, Jeremy.
I was just given a figure by Sarah Pochin, which even for what I do, terrifies me. £300 billion we'll spend on benefits this year, 55 billion on defence. It is not purely to Starmer. This is successive governments who've taken the easy option whilst maintaining foreign aid budgets and benefit ballooning budgets and cut our defences, and we're now incredibly vulnerable, aren't we, Trevor?
Yes, we are. And of course, the first duty of any government, whichever party it may be, is to defend the nation. And frankly, we are in a situation where we risk being totally defenceless. We cannot afford new warships and we can't build them in time for the current emergency. We cannot provide the sort of aircraft on tap that we need, nor the submarines, nor even the drone capacity that we should have, because we haven't got the petrochemical industry anymore to provide the plastics that we need to build drones. We're effectively, as Jim Ratcliffe of INEOS, the petrochemical company, points out, we're effectively defenceless.
I mean, that just going with that, and I mean, is in itself a dereliction of duty. And this isn't down to the Labour Party. This is down to the Tories, and they have to own that. I don't know whether they would admit to owning that. I think it's been an easy cop-out. But if we talk about Starmer, which is the other issue here, and overnight, Trevor, you know, Trump, I'm not happy. Yes, OK, fine. And apparently some poll, I can't find anybody involved with the poll, but a poll says 70% of Britons don't do it. My issue with Starmer is, and it's really simple, I don't care if I disagree with everything you say, right? But stand by it, man. Stop changing your mind. No, you can't have my bases. Yes, you can. No, you can't have boats. So I'll wait 2 weeks, then you can. Is it not fair to say in your political experience, the way you deal with somebody like Donald Trump is you deal with him by staying consistent, playing your part and sticking up for the truth about this country? If we're not in a position to help him, or Starmer doesn't want to help him, stick to your bloody guns, man. But he doesn't. The flip-flopping is what drives people insane, Trevor.
But that's what you've got. I mean, Starmer is a flip-flopper. He doesn't study the situation and then make up his mind according to the facts. He's always looking for another fact to get him off the hook. And there isn't another fact to get him off the hook on arguments like this. We are either in or we're out. And we have to argue, if we're out, a principled argument, a principled stand, which justifies our decision to abandon basically our closest and most important international ally.
Great piece in the column when you said, old duffers like me, born amid the ruins of the London Blitz, sometimes wonder how today's mollycoddle generation could cope with another real war. I think that's fantastic. They couldn't, could they?
Well, I really don't think they could. I mean, look, hang on. There is a segment of our young people who are still very robust, and they would rally to the flag. They would fight for king and country. But there is a very significant minority who wouldn't lift a finger and would resent any suggestion that we are running to the aid of an ally, particularly the great Satan America, and maybe even more particularly Israel.
And I mean, I just had a picture sent to me by my daughter, who's out celebrating St Paddy's Day already at 8:30, and she always tells me, you know, she's been in lectures where they'll say Britain's responsible for everything wrong in the world. Our history is a disgrace, and we should apologise. That ideology is spreading. I can look at the United Kingdom in its entirety and be quite depressed about things right now, but one thing's for sure, if you don't, as you said, defend your country in the most robust way, you end up in trouble. And to bring it back to how we started, Trev, which is what your article's about, you know, this ballooning welfare budget. I mean, what did he try and cut, Starmer, some months ago? A ridiculously inadequate $5 billion. And by the time all his MPs had jumped up and down, he didn't even manage to cut anything. And it needs more than $5 billion. It probably needs to be slashed by 100 billion, and we need to make savings elsewhere and spend it in the right ways. Doesn't have the courage, the political fortitude to do that, does he?
I'd vote for you as Prime Minister immediately, Jeremy. You know, going back to this attack on our history, I was walking past the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square yesterday, and I heard a young tour guide lecturing these innocent elderly visitors to the capital about the inequities of the British Empire, how it stole and rampaged through the world, stealing arts and enabling slavery and so on. And I actually turned around and went back to them and said, do not believe a word this man says.
We ended slavery. We ended slavery.
This is the official tour guide telling visitors to our country.
Do you know what? Do you know why I love having you on and I love doing this? Because you know, my dad's no longer here, but he would be. Maybe I am turning into him. Britain was proud of itself. Yes, Britain's made mistakes, but we seem to look backwards. We seem to be apologising for almost everything. But do you know what really sticks in my gut, Trevor, is all these people who either come in here illegally or are brainwashed by an ideology. Excuse my French. Why don't they just sod off somewhere else? Because you patently don't like my country. You patently take from my country while slagging every part of my country off. And I don't even understand why you want to be here. That's the real thing for me. If you're going to come here or live here, play your part, be part of it, embrace it and help it. Don't slag it off whilst we're wiping your backside. To me, that's what's wrong.
All of that is true too, but the important thing that I think we should worry about is that, for instance, this tour guide was British. He was white. He was quite young. He was the product probably of our education system, our universities, our colleges, all of which denigrate our history as much as they possibly can. They're looking for grievances that they can pick the scab off. Anything that they can point that is derogatory to the British record through 2,000 years of history.
Do you think they'd be here with their mollycoddle lives unless the people, their forefathers and mothers, had fought for the rights and the liberties that they fought for? Do you think these kids, and I'm with you, it's one of my bugbears, do you think they've any idea of not only hardship, but should they not understand the gratitude that we should have? I mean, when people say to me, oh, Winston Churchill was a racist, well, he'd be German, you idiots. That's I don't even understand it. And maybe that's an age thing. And I rail against the fact, and I hope you're right. I want the younger generation to be aware and to be proud of this country, even where we are in the world right now.
Well, I think the big problem is, as I say, it's partly education, Joe, but it's also the left-wing tendency and ability to seize the language.
Yeah.
I mean, they are the ones who, right from the beginning, silenced any criticism of immigration by branding anyone who was opposed or had an argument against as racist and fascist. And the same applies now to genocide, a word which does not apply to any current conflict in the world, but it's being brandished around as the hallmark of where the evil is being committed. And as long as you've got the language and the ability to inflict it on people who are not fighting back, they will have the dominancy. And I think that we face, don't forget that I pointed out in the article that it's 80 years, 8 decades since we last were involved in a conflict as a country, a serious conflict where we actually suffered the consequences here in Britain. And people have totally forgotten that. That's 3 generations almost. And that memory has gone. And all they can remember now is the fact that they've got social media in which they carry out their own form of propaganda, talking to idiots on the other end.
I was remembering, as you were speaking, the old man in a care home during COVID and going to see him. It makes me smile. Going to see him through the glass. And I made the mistake of saying to Patrick, you all right? He went, of course I'm all right. I was about 3 weeks in. I said, what? He said, well, we did this for 6 years. He said, there's more food than we ever had with rationed and the doors are locked and the women can't get away from me. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I mean, I know we laugh, but that resilience, that fight has gone, man, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, all you've got now in its place is anxiety and prescriptions and people ducking off work because they're nervous about going in to talk to people. I mean, you know, this is, I think it's an epidemic which is going to be very, very difficult to reverse. And were we actually to get to the point of having to fight to defend this country in the way we did 80 years ago, I do not believe the majority would be a vote for fighting to defend king and country.
What's going on in the world, Therese? And I have to ask you, and I know you've been somebody who's very, very honest. I don't blame Starmer. I blame successive Tory governments. I blame 20 years. We find ourselves in a position that cutting our defence budget, which I would have thought was the first duty of any government, is to defend its country. We are patently ill-placed in terms of how we look in the world in terms of our defences. Starting with Cameron and well beyond, it was always an easy cut. Turns out that was a bad decision, doesn't it?
I think historically, actually, the UK has continued to spend over 2% of its GDP. It used to be one of the very few NATO countries that did that. I've got no doubt that there have been definitely a number of issues in terms of equipment procurement and some of the other factors that we're seeing now. But equipping with the 2 aircraft carriers, obviously a big difference, and then more recently designing more modern ships. But I appreciate a lot of this takes time. Meanwhile, funding has continued, of course, to support our nuclear deterrent. So I think there's a variety of ways that people can consider whether we are ready for a war on our own today. I think the answer for that is no, and hasn't been required for a very long time. That's part of the point of being in NATO and making the contributions that we do. But inevitably, does seem what embarrassing that it seems been so slow to get things like HMS Dragon out, and our relationship with Cyprus is very special.
Hindsight's great, and what I love about these conversations is people always just are very honest and open. In hindsight, successive governments shouldn't have cut the defence budget so badly, should they?
I'm not convinced that defence spending is actually being cut. I appreciate it may not have kept up with aspects of inflation, and that's where we've seen a big change, I guess, in what's happened. But in terms of its proportion of our GDP, which is the usual way of kind of benchmarking this, that from my recollection has not gone down. But inflation has definitely harmed some of the activity, but so has project management. But it's key that we support the government in trying to make improvements. But some of this still relies on judgment and speed of agility and making those decisions on where we deploy and how we deploy, including.
Just talking about the government before we talk about meningitis, you were around a few prime ministers. I can't even imagine how many. Deputy Prime Minister to Liz Truss, Boris Johnson. Who else did you serve under? Theresa May?
I served, I'm one of a handful of former MPs who served under every Conservative Prime Minister.
When you look, without making it personal, at this man, and I wanted, today I used the example of 70% of polls of people saying we don't want to go to war. What I, as a voter, feel massively about this man is that there is no leadership, there's no courage, there's no political DNA. Even if I, Therese, would spend my life disagreeing with everything he says, think of Corbyn. I had some sort of respect for Corbyn when he stood entirely on his principles and nearly beat Theresa May. This man doesn't stick to anything. I don't think we should kowtow to Trump, although I think we should. Bases, yes, no. Minesweepers, yes, no. I get the feeling that a man who came to power saying he was going to put country before party has turned out to be a complete and utter liar on that front, because he seems to make decisions entirely on his little circle and how it does for him politically. Would you agree with that?
I think a long-standing criticism is that he's a lawyer, not a leader. Yeah. And it does seem that he will U-turn on the drop of a hat at the flick of a poll, and that is concerning. But I will also say I don't have access to the information anymore that the Prime Minister and his current cabinet do. So I don't want to overly judge on the situation right now. I think what's worrying, though, is a lot of investment went into the relationship with President Trump, understandably. Yeah. And actually, President Trump is the person who said he didn't want to be having wars. But when things like the Five Eyes intelligence are at risk, risk of that not being shared because of the current inaction by the government. That is worrying, not only in the short term, but the long term. And it's those long-term relationships, the messy handling of the Chagos Islands, the Diego Garcia base, all of this, you know, the lawyer, not a leader, not considering what is really in our country's best interests. So that is what those are what worry me.
Completely. Got a couple of minutes more. Let's talk about this meningitis scare. I'm at pains to, you know, Front of the Sun says it was about vapes. I'm at pains to sort of calm people down, and people will get concerned about this. 2 people have died, 11 still in hospital. They say it started in a nightclub, close proximity, etc., etc. You were Health Secretary. There's some criticism this morning. They've been criticised for waiting days before issuing that public warning. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, Therese, aren't they?
I think that's fair. That on Saturday, the UK HSA was informed. They started work on the close contacts. Clearly, this has spread more quickly than they expected, and fortunately, they've now identified specifically which strain it is, so that is useful. But it is important that people get vaccines. It so happens young people have not been offered this vaccine routinely, except since 2015. So I think there is a question now for the government to make that decision, recognising this is an unusual expansion of meningitis. I've had meningitis myself in the past. That should they proactively start offering the vaccine?
Without fearing people, is there a danger, because I haven't got long, bless you, is there a danger this could spread nationwide in your experience?
I think it's unlikely, but there are definitely clusters. And at the moment, the meningitis vaccine is actually available for treatment of other diseases quite freely. It's provided to try and stop gonorrhea, as an example. So it's being deployed around the country. I think that the government should consider being proactive about university students and offering everybody in that bracket the opportunity to come forward and get a MenB vaccine. I think that would be a sensible step.
It's only been brief, but I'm delighted having had you on. Will you come on again?
I'm sure I'll find the opportunity to come on and speak to the other Jeremy, as it were. Can be cut off another time. I'll very happy to come and chat to you.
Let's look at this story. The Jewish music producer subjected to a shocking anti-Semitic attack in North London. It's a horrific headline. Sadly, not a surprising one, because we're seeing more and more of this. Our reporter, Talk Breakfast reporter Samara Gill, has been right across this. Samara, morning to you. Tell us more.
Morning, Ian. Yeah, I completely agree with that description. It is shocking, but it's not surprising, you know. Even when I showed up to his studio to record the interview, I was thinking, and I listened to him, and I saw the tears in his eyes at what happened to him, which we'll get into in just a second. I was thinking, I cannot believe this is kind of becoming a regular occurrence in the United Kingdom. People getting disrespected for their faith and actually getting almost killed for it. Let's just take a look at what he said happened to him.
At the top of his voice, Heil Hitler, death to all Jews, you should all be dead, go to the gas chambers, etc., and worse. So I was either going to run in the house and hide or try and stop him, because, you know, I don't think we can sit back and just leave it anymore. So knowing full well you never know what he's going to bring out from his jacket, I kept a couple of metres behind him and just said, stop it, disappear. So he continued a lot louder and continued with even more horrific abuse. And I said, if you do it again, I'll call the police, which is really the only option you've got, you know. So I called 999, and walking behind him so I could make sure I knew where he was going for the police. And I lost concentration a little bit of where he was. And as I was talking to the police, he ran at me and threw me in front of a vehicle that was going, what, 25 miles an hour, roughly?
So he physically grabbed you?
He physically ran at me, grabbed me and shoved me in front of the car.
I mean, this, Samara, is absolutely horrific. It's blatant. It's daylight, and as we said at the beginning, it's not the first of these kind of attacks, but the idea that this was done with such casualness from the perpetrator here is horrifying.
Totally, and it's the type of anti-Semitism that, you know, 1930s Germany witnessed, whereby just for being Jewish, you were subject to all types of threats and violence. I mean, he told me that essentially the guy yelled Jew as he pushed him in front of the car. Now, thank God, Brian Harris, who is the music producer in question, was okay, but he survived. He had scrapes on him. He had cuts. He was said that he was very lucky because the driver of the car that he was pushed into was a younger gentleman who was able to stop quite quickly. But he said that if it had been any other instance, we might not even be having that conversation because he might have been killed. This wasn't just abuse. This was near fatal assault, in my view. And I feel like, you know, where was the deterrence? Where is the message? Brian was so upset because he felt so unsupported by this government that continues to pander to every other community but the Jewish community, and doesn't want to keep them safe. You know, he was saying his synagogue has been offered one extra security guard in general. That isn't even to do with his own issue, but to do with the rise of anti-Semitism. Where is the actual deterrence on the streets and the education as to not do this? And we see this in Gail's Bakery, you know, just this week. We at the Al-Quds Day March, I have never experienced that level of anti-Semitism out on the streets. It is growing and growing. And if we don't pop a cork in it now, it's just going to go completely out of control. I just want to see kind of or show you the reaction after and what Brian has said about the future of Britain.
Where is the political will to prevent this country sinking into something I think that's really, really serious, because it's not being dealt with?
Many people have exited the country. Many have moved to Israel and other parts of the world. I mean, is that something you'd ever consider doing, especially after this horrific event?
I don't think you will find a Jewish family in this country who have not sat round the dinner table at some stage in the past 2 years and have said, are we safe here? Should we go? How do we go? What are the circumstances with our families if we stay or will we go? I guarantee you every Jewish family have had that conversation. Well, isn't that what happened in the 1930s in Germany? And areas of the country are now no-go areas.
I mean, this is an outrage, isn't it? We've got no-go areas for Jewish people in this country. Do we know anything, Samara, about the perpetrator? What has happened? What have the police said? Did he get away?
Yeah, so to the police's credit, they came in about 3 minutes and they heard the whole thing transpire because obviously he called them before he was pushed. But unfortunately, the perpetrator is still alive and well and on the streets and hasn't been caught. Now, the police are trying to scan CCTV footage from the nearby synagogue. They're trying to ask other people who might have witnessed the attack if they've got any type of lead. But, you know, this was a young person from Brian's description, someone who might have been radicalized online through all the propaganda that the pro-Palestine activists spew online. And I guess it emboldened him to go and push a random stranger into moving traffic because he just assumed that he was a Jew because he was walking near a synagogue. This is a very dangerous precedent. And I feel like things like this are just 1 degree away from that synagogue terrorist attack that we witnessed late last year. So, you know, we need to bring these stories to light. We need to call them out for what they are: blatant, rancid Jew hatred. And I'm just very thankful that Brian is okay. And he's an avid watcher of Talk and a massive fan of yours, Ian. So he's just a lovely guy. And it was just harrowing to see what had happened to him and what he'd been a subject of. You could see he was very affected by it still.
Dr. Alan Mendoza joins us, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and Reform UK's Chief Advisor on Global Affairs. Good to see you again, Alan. I mean, it is, you know, we've talked a lot this morning already about these kind of growing cases of anti-Semitism. They're not just little moments in the street. Some of these are violent. Some of them are almost lethal. They're horrendous and they're on the up. What on earth is going on?
Well, what on earth is going on, unfortunately, Ian, is the legacy of years of doing nothing about it. The reason anti-Semitism is growing in the UK is because the penalties for anti-Semitism have not been made clear or enforced to those who have been perpetrating them. And we've seen a massive increase over time as anti-Semitism has, you know, come to the fore from people who might not have said anything anti-Semitic a few years ago, but have felt that they've been empowered to do more now. So it's, you know, unfortunately, it's a trend that's stemming now from the far left, from Islamist sources, that's responsible mainly for the increase, and that is causing a huge worry for Britain's Jews, I think.
Absolutely. And when you hear a experienced civil servant, former civil servant, speaking out in this kind of way, I think we should sit up and take notice.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, the idea, you know, if someone's come out and said he believes Islamism is rife in the civil service as an ideology, it does accord with things that I hear from civil servants I know who are worried about the impact of this particular ideology within the people who essentially ensure Britain runs. It's difficult to challenge it, apparently. People are scared of being called racist if they call it out. And again, let's just be very clear. This is not about Islam as a religion. This is about people who believe in Islamism, which is, if you like, the political version of Islam, which they feel it should inform every aspect of life. That is very different to most Muslims who obviously see it as a religion within the UK. But here are people who actually want to impose it upon not only themselves but others as being the code within which they want to rule, to sort of live their lives. And that is, I think, a massive problem again.
Yeah.
It needs to be tackled within the civil service.
Indeed. And of course, it's not. What's curious about these stories, Alan, is it's not always. We're not always just talking about Muslims that are advancing this cause. I mean, there's plenty of non-Muslims on the left who, for some reason, I've never quite fathomed it. I don't know whether they think it makes them less likely of being accused of being a racist or something. It's just, in the same way that you never really get the left condemn issues in the Middle East, well, even ISIS and horrendous stories such as that. They almost can't bring themselves to condemn a brown person. I think that's at the heart of it. And it goes against everything. It feels as if it's sort of counterintuitive to everything they stand for. And if they start talking about Islamism, political Islamism, then that might make them a bad person. Is it that, or as simple as that, or is there something else going on here?
Well, it's a bit more complicated. I think you're right, of course. There is that, kind of prevalence of, me white bad, you not white good. What you're doing, therefore, I cannot challenge because of my terrible history of colonialism and a legacy of oppression, that kind of political ideology built in. But I would argue it's something more than that. It's often called the soft bigotry of low expectations. Often this sort of white saviour complex, to use the phrase they like to use themselves in this way, is driven by the sense actually of inverse racism. It's basically saying, we're the oppressors, but we're not expecting anything of you. We are expecting that you are, of a low mindset. You don't know any better. We can't impose anything on you, and therefore we don't expect you to change. And it's actually a form of racism, essentially, to go and say, because you are a different colour as such, we are not going to dare expect you to do anything different. Yeah. So there are complicated reasonings within the left. Some of it is, guilt. Some of it is, kind of trying to whip yourself. And some of it, I think, is actually a sense of, let's pat these people on the head and say you're okay to do this. So all these things come together in a very potent cocktail, and that leads to a situation where an ideology that should be challenged, because essentially it is akin to fascism, is not challenged. And we end up with its growth and its deleterious effect, firstly on Muslims themselves, who are often the first victims of Islamism, those who are not Islamists, and then everyone else who become the next victims after those Muslims who are victims first.
Worth having a listen to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, on that issue of radical Islam. Here he is.
Radical Islamic movements in the world identify the West writ large, but the United States in particular, as the greatest evil on the earth. And every chance to have the notion that somehow radical Islam would be comfortable with simply controlling some province in Iraq or Syria is just not borne out by history. Radical Islam has shown that their desire is not simply to occupy one part of the world and be happy with their own little caliphate. They want to expand. It's revolutionary in its nature. It seeks to expand and control more territories and more people. And radical Islam has designs openly on the West, on the United States, on Europe. We've seen that progress there as well.
I mean, on that point, Alan, do you think there is a radical Islamist threat to the UK?
Of course there is. There are people in this country today, even British citizens, who don't believe in the British values that have traditionally, empowered this country. They fundamentally oppose them, and they wish to impose in their stead a 7th century code of law from Arabia. That is what they wish to bring in. That is quite clear. They have said it openly. No one's hiding this, Ian. This is the interesting part. There's no sort of secret about this. There are people in the UK who are openly going around, spreading Islamism, Islamist mantras.
Yeah.
They're not ashamed of saying so, and we are just not listening to what is happening.
We're not listening, and as I said at the beginning, there's this almost a tacit encouragement coming from quarters that should, frankly, know better. You were not in Trafalgar Square yesterday on your knees praying, as far as I know, just to clarify.
No, I'm not. Neither am I in the United Arab Emirates at the moment. But I would say that where I normally live in Dubai, which is clearly a Muslim country, I've never seen anything like that and would not expect to see anything like that. And I think it would be immensely frowned upon because it is very in your face. And that is not how cultures that respect each other's differences actually operate. I've seen, I don't want to go into too much detail of this because I don't have the story right to my fingertips now, but I think that there have been various iftar celebrations. So that is the breaking of the fast after sunset inside churches in the UK. I'll come back on that if I can get the picture.
Oh, I can't wait for that. Goodness me.
I do have a problem with that. I really do have a problem with that. Now, I mean, I've been brought up a Christian. My family were very, very dedicated to their faith. You know, my parents were, it was a very important part of their lives. And my mother was always very keen on interfaith dialogue. So I'm not against that at all. You know, people of all religions and none need to talk to each other. And I enjoy understanding what other religions believe and their value system and so on. But I don't think we need to put it in each other's faces.
Indeed.
And do that in central London, I do think that is an act of religious aggression, actually.
And that's the point I think Nick Timothy is making. And it's interesting, you talked about being in a Muslim country where you don't see that kind of stuff. The fellow that cuts my hair is a Muslim, and he was saying exactly this to me. He's from Jordan. And he said, I had to almost look up what Sharia law was when I came to this country. He said, because it's not something anybody really talks about in Jordan. But over here, these conversations are live and they're real. He said there's loads of things going on. He said that they're just not really recognisable to him as a Muslim. So something's happening. And we spoke earlier to a bishop on this point, Isabel, who's written a letter to the King suggesting that this country has lost its Christian identity. What do you say to that?
I really fear that's happening, and it's happening fast. And I mean, the acceleration of this in the last year, I think, has been quite extraordinary. You know, although I do live in the UAE for much of the year, I'm also back and forth all the time, and I'm very well tapped in to what's going on all over the country, thanks to all the people that write to me, that share images and so on. And this is the acceleration of this is quite stunning. You know, you've now got, we'll all notice it in the supermarkets, much bigger signs about celebrating Ramadan, marking Eid. Somebody sent me a message yesterday of a school head teacher put out a message to everybody about the timings of Eid celebrations and so on. I've got no problem whatsoever with our pupils in the UK learning about all the different religions and their festivals, but there seems to have been a pivot in the last year. And that pivot is a strong pivot away from our fundamental Christian heritage here in the UK towards a whole new system. Yeah. And I'm very, very concerned about what that means for our culture. It's fine if it's lightly worn, but mass prayings, and it's not the first one we've seen. I did a story for Talk about 6 to 9 months ago about those scenes on a beach, on the beach down in Bournemouth. Yeah. That is not wearing religion with delicacy and discretion. You know, I can't think of the Christian equivalent. Maybe we have church choirs that do carols in stations. It's not quite the same thing, is it? Carols are something we can all enjoy, something that's part of our heritage. We invite everybody to join in that. What I see there in those images that we're playing to Talk's viewers is quite excluding, I would say. I think that is the word I would use, and it's intimidating. And by the way, where are the women?
I was going to say, there's a distinct lack of women in that press. Well, what's that all about? I mean, that's a whole, that's a whole other story in this respect, I guess. You mentioned the word pivot, and there's a lot of pivoting going on, whether it's in religion or whether it's in politics, Isabel. And we know that, the Labour Party can't quite, they're sort of, licking their finger and sticking it in the air and seeing which way the wind blows. Or we were going to be a bit reformy at one point, and Keir Starmer gave a speech that apparently had nothing to do with him about the island of strangers. Now, of course, it appears after a bit of a wounding in a by-election and a few more headlines they didn't much like, they're going more to the left. And who do you unleash on the Labour Party when things are going leftwards, or who unleashes themselves? But Angela Rayner, because she's back on the scene and she's got teeth and she's on manoeuvres, Isabel.
Well, she's always good for national entertainment. I don't want to see her running the country, but I've got a great deal of time for her spirit and energy. She's a lot more interesting to report on than Keir Starmer. But if she is the answer to this nation's problems, then I don't really know what question it is that's being... we are in a very serious time, not just because of what's going on in the Middle East, but because of the state of our economy, which I think is absolutely teetering on the brink. We had a zero growth recorded in the last set of economic indices. We know what's happening with youth unemployment. It is shocking. It's above the average of our key competitors and parallel economies in the EU. And we know also the debate that you've been having earlier today on the show, Ian, about the number of benefits claimants, the millions of people that are apparently too disabled to work.
Yeah.
I don't know, when I go out, I don't see rows and rows of disabled people staggering around the country. There are plenty of people who absolutely need and deserve this support, but I'm afraid it is patently obvious, overwhelmingly obvious, that there is a significant number of people who are abusing the system, and that is so bad for the people that really need the help.
The story that has been dominating the headlines, not just locally in Kent, but nationally, that's the meningitis outbreak down there in Canterbury, now being treated as a national incident after an infected person was admitted to a London hospital. Wes Streeting has described the spread of the disease, which has killed a sixth form pupil and a university student, as unprecedented. It's been reported that a 9-month-old girl is critically ill in hospital with the disease despite being vaccinated against it. And we know the number of cases of meningitis being investigated has now risen to 20 from 15. Let's speak to Professor Ellie Lee, Professor at University of Kent and a mother of a child who attends the Queen Elizabeth Grammar School. Ellie, good morning to you.
Hi.
It's interesting, your kind of description of who you are, where you work, and your own family education does cross this story in multiple areas. I mean, it doesn't need to be said again, the tragedy of what has happened, and particularly the loss of two very young people.
Yes, the main thing that I would like to come on your show and say is my absolute and utter admiration for Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School, the head Amelia McElroy, and the staff there, and the way they have responded to this situation. The loss of Juliet, it's a small sixth form and a relatively small secondary school. And the loss of Juliet is bearing so heavy on everybody. Yeah. Of course, everybody's first thoughts entirely are with the family and her friends. The school has managed an incredibly difficult situation outstandingly. The messaging has been brilliant. There's a lot of criticism of the Health Security Agency knocking around. My experience of it is that they have been extremely helpful to the school, and so the school has been able to be very clear with parents. So, that's the situation we're in. The children are all in today. The sixth form is getting itself back together. It's very important that they're in.
Yeah.
I'm very opposed to efforts to bring about lockdown. That would be the worst possible thing to do.
Well, I mean, it's a troubling story on so many levels. Clearly, everyone's thoughts are with the parents and the family of the two people that have lost their life as a result of meningitis. Your child goes to that school. I mean, you talked about the school being open, and that's the right thing to do. One of the knock-on effects of something like this happening that we don't really think about too much is the effects on the other children as well. I mean, this is an incredibly traumatic thing.
They need to be together, and the school needs to work their way through all of this together.
Yeah.
My daughter was at the club with Juliet at Club Chemistry. They had a beautiful, happy, joyous evening, celebrating two friends who had turned 18. Actually, on Sunday night, they all knew they needed to get antibiotics. My daughter took antibiotics at 8:30 Monday morning. So the response from the kids has been fast.
Yeah.
And the health centre here was a bit underprepared, but got prepared very fast. The university is basically turned into an antibiotic distribution centre. So at that level, the children who were in any way could think of themselves as close contacts have responded very maturely, very sensibly.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do is to make sense of the death of a friend,
of course,
and work out how the school copes. And people need to give them space to do that. There's so much noise. There was a helicopter flying over Queen Elizabeth Grammar School on Monday, and the place was mobbed with journalists. It was extremely unhelpful. People need to give the middle of this. There needs to be space to be sensible.
Indeed, there is naturally an interest in something like this for many reasons. Lots of people talking about what happened in the nightclub. I mean, there's various. Nobody yet knows, whether it's sharing vapes, whether it's people kissing, whether it's coughing, whatever it happens to be. I mean, all those questions will be out there, and who knows whether anybody ever gets to the point of knowing precisely where or how this started. But started it did, and those numbers are on the increase. You also lecture at the University of Kent, of course, the other area affected by this, where a student has died. Give us your response as to what's happening at your own place of work there.
I think that the university has tried to be very sensible. I mean, term actually ends on Friday. We're in an assessment week. There wouldn't have been any teaching this week anyway. The university is trying to do its best through provision of, using the Senate to provide antibiotics to anybody who considers they need it. My students who I teach should have been doing an in-person exam on Monday, actually. The exams were put online. I think people need to understand, though, that part of that was to make sure as complete as possible completion of examination, because you don't want a few people not turning up.
Yeah.
So it's not, I think that people, so obviously I'm in a slightly different position. I'm my daughter's mum with Queen Elizabeth School. At work, I'm a member of staff.
Yeah.
So it's slightly different considerations. The thing that overlaps is the absolute importance of adults trying to keep their minds sound and calm, and to not do things that inflame unnecessarily. And the script that is coming into place far, far too quickly is the COVID script, and this is not.
Yeah.
It's a different infection.
Is that, I mean, just on that point, I mean, obviously a university is bigger than a school. I know the University of Kent reasonably well. It's a big campus, and is there panic there because of those headlines and because of those rumours that are sort of fuelled in a kind of COVID sense?
I think that's unfortunately what's increased over the week, and this is what I mean is that I think that people who are reporting on this, I think we could do with a lot less report. And honestly, I think we could do with a lot less reporting.
Yeah.
I think that we could do with the health authorities and people that run the institutions at the centre of it, having time and space to calmly deal with the practical and very difficult problem in front of them. Speculation and rumour is so unhelpful, because it makes it very, very difficult to do the right thing. I mean, part of what it's done is I think some students have been panicked into leaving the university.
Yeah, that is the worst issue on that.
Are you in England or Dubai? Am I allowed to ask that? Have you managed to get back yet?
No, so I'm in the UK at the moment, and frankly, I'm rather glad I'm in the UK because Dubai had a pretty awful 24 hours yesterday. It really was tough. They had 7 missile alerts in the space of 24 hours, and a lot of them were through the night. And I know that people living there, you know, they're getting a little bit weary. When you have to get up in the middle of the night and keep going into basements and so on, that is tough, but it is a small price to pay for what we all hope is going to be a whole realigned Middle East. But there have been some pretty serious developments, not in relation in particular to the UAE, but in relation to the whole conflict in the last 12 hours. Not all of our listeners will have caught up with Trump's extraordinary message on Truth Social, in which he lashes out at Israel over an attack that they made on an energy facility in Iran, which then prompted Iran to attack a major facility in Qatar. And what Trump has done is distanced himself from Israel. And you can imagine just how significant that is. You know, the gap opening up between the two countries that are basically supposed to be in lockstep on this whole campaign. The implications of that are potentially very, very significant and serious indeed. And the implications of the hit on the energy plant in Qatar are also very significant economically. And we've already seen a massive spike in gas prices.
23% we broke that a minute ago. 23% gas is up and petrol. Many people will say on this show, oh, you permanently compliment Trump. No, and here's a point where I'm going to criticise him. I do think we should have been at the forefront. I do, and sat and watched him say this will be in and out and no boots on the ground. And I watched him win the election based on no foreign intervention. I think he thought that this would fold quicker. There was a mass funeral yesterday for the head of intelligence in Iran, and hundreds of thousands took to the street. We can still talk about oppression, but it doesn't seem that the people are turning. I'm a cynic, right? That message on Truth Social, criticising Israel, could well be him doing what he usually does, because Europe will not join him in the Straits of Hormuz. I suspect this might be his way of getting out and blaming Israel. I've no idea. I'm just going to throw that into the mix. But he has to be listening. His main national security advisor's resigned, apparently talking to J.D. Vance before him, I read. It doesn't seem to be happening. There's no doubt Iran sponsors terrorism, had nuclear weapons, and the man and that government deserves to fall. But I don't think that Trump is being viewed the same as he was 2 weeks ago in terms of his intentions and his success, Isabel.
It's a very, very odd way to conduct a war, to turn on your partner in that war in public. That is astonishing. It will cause all manner of problems in the conduct of this conflict. And, you know, from the point of view of the Gulf nations, trying to have a sort of half-assed off-ramp at this point. Sorry about that analogy. It's not quite right. You did get me out of bed early.
No, I like the fact. It's the first time you've ever said half-assed. I'm going to keep playing it back. I loved it. Thank you very much. I mean that.
I just don't think that is the worst of all worlds. I think, you know, particularly for the region, for the wider world, of course. But I saw it likened to being stuck in mice being stuck in a cage with a cat, and make that cat a kind of deranged and violent cat. And then you've got potentially what a very, very weakened but furious Iran might feel like in terms of living next door.
So here's $1 million question, which I never thought I would be asking you. Has Keir Starmer got it right then in Europe by not agreeing to jump into bed with Trump from day one, as it appears that he is starting to crumble in certain areas? Was Keir Starmer correct?
Well, perhaps if there'd been a more robust allied intervention here, Trump wouldn't be where he is, which is feeling to some extent on his own with this problem. You know, he's now sort of slightly distanced himself, well, significantly distanced himself from his one main partner in it. And all these other countries have said, well, sorry, mate, we're not going to help you. And that is a dangerous situation. I think it is massively threatening to NATO. We know this president has always been very ambivalent in his attitude towards this amazing defence alliance that has served everybody so well over the decades, but only because it's underpinned by the US.
Absolutely.
You know, what we don't want is an angry Trump who feels as if he's been betrayed and let down by European allies, just saying, actually, you know, what's the point of NATO?
Yep.
We did everything for you. When the call came and I needed you to help in the Gulf, you were nowhere to be seen. So I think we're at a very, very dangerous point in this conflict. Now, we're also seeing, very interestingly, the Gulf countries coming together. They've issued a letter this morning calling on Iran to immediately cease and desist attacking them and reiterating their right to push back. I mean, what is astonishing if you think about it, in relation to the UAE in particular, they've taken more missiles, more drones than Israel.
Yep.
And they have yet to push back.
I said it earlier, I wonder when Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and all these countries get their heads together and they start to kick back against Iran, which of course will frighten many people. But I think that could be the catalyst for the off-ramp, for want of a better phrase. That might bring Iran to the table, I would imagine.
Well, Iran has gone for the highest stakes strategy, and what he's doing is absolutely hammering the Middle Eastern economies, in particular the UAE, which is so dependent on tourism, on property, on the very things that become vulnerable when you've got a population that is highly mobile and you know, understandably doesn't really want to sit there in a conflict zone. And it is a high stakes strategy to go attacking your neighbours in an unprovoked situation like this. And even if there is an off-ramp now, which I'm afraid I don't believe there will be, I think we are way too far in. Look at these pictures that we're showing our listeners now of oil fields blowing up, black billowing smoke. These are replicated all around the Middle East at the moment in different forms. There's no off-ramp tomorrow. There's no off-ramp next week. But even if there were, the damage and the implications for the delicate relationships in the region between the different Gulf countries are going to take a very long time to smooth over, to heal. We're not going to see, in my view, a new and happy Middle East anytime soon. And we have to believe that the objective has been achieved in order for those terrible consequences for the region to have been in any way arguably worth it. What I'm saying is Trump's got to finish this now, I'm afraid.
Interesting. Just quickly, God, I wish you're so great. I love having you on, mate. We started with your favourite person, Keir Starmer. U-turn number 4,365 incoming. Our Ange had stood up 2 nights ago and said it was very un-British to, well, she didn't say in that posh voice. She went, it's very un-British to not let all these migrants in. Many people, Reform, of course, Richard's party and other parties, now the Tories, are saying that the ECHR is madness and needs to be got rid of. I just thought it ironic to give you this story, which has completely and utterly galvanised the audience this morning. On the day we imagine that Keir Starmer's going to U-turn and be softer on immigration to placate the left of the party, led by Burnham and Rayner, not in that particular order, this appalling story this morning of the 19-year-old girl who was raped in Wrexham by a Nigerian migrant just weeks after he'd been found to have carried out a sexually motivated attack and imprisoning a woman in Manchester. And this week, for Christ's sake, I can't even say this with a straight face, he got the right to stay in Britain, having got you and me, the taxpayer, and everybody listening, to pay for his lawyer, because apparently, according to this lawyer, he has a right to a family life, which completely and utterly throws in the water anything about that girl and her family. And it leads me to say this to you, Isabel. Further down the line, Lammy's attempts to get rid of jurors. We're going to be left with judges like this who have the same ideology as this bonkers government. Something needs to give. How on earth am I supposed to live in a country that says it's okay to rape a girl because you've come from somewhere else and you've decided that you have more rights than her? It's ludicrous.
I've actually got an immediate solution to this. So, Jeremy, did you know that there is a state visit of Nigeria?
We've done this already. You're not gonna. We've done this already. Get on the plane with the king. Absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, sorry, I'm very sorry for the delegation because I don't think they'll want him either. Clearly, they don't want anything to do with him. But maybe he could be put in the hold or something. You know, not in with the passengers, but in with the luggage.
But on a serious note, you're a woman, and I genuinely has wound me up since 5:30 this morning. We are now in a country that says that you can rape a girl and you can get away with it under some law that wasn't made in this country, and some lawyers found a loophole, and you have a right to a family life, having taken from that young girl every possible bit of her confidence or innocence, and probably her life and her family's will never be the same again. We're a laughing stock with rubbish like this. It's ridiculous, Isabel, ridiculous.
It doesn't need to be complicated at all. If you commit certain crimes, and I put the threshold way lower than what you've just described there, if you commit certain crimes, you are out and there is no process of negotiation, appeal, any further argument. You are not using our taxpayer-funded legal aid system to argue the case for you to remain. There are red lines, and that has gone so far beyond the red lines, it's somewhere on another continent. We absolutely, a future government would change this. I'm just saying, if it were a reform government, I'm sure Shadow Home Secretary Zia Youssef would be saying exactly the same thing, that there just would be no negotiation here.
A very good morning to a man who made it to the higher echelons of politics, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, who's probably... Oh, where is he today? Are you in some foreign clime, Nigel?
No, La Rochelle in France, Jeremy. So I just got the call about 10 minutes ago, so I had to rush from my croissant to get back to my hotel room to do this interview, but good to talk to you.
We're very grateful for you, my friend. It's all because Robert Jenrick can't tell the time, but we'll be dealing with him in 10 minutes. I wanted to talk to you, actually. I wanted to play you something, if I can. I've never heard of Andrew Snowden before, have you?
Yeah, of course. He's the Lancashire MP, and I remember talking to him just before the general election, and I said, Andrew, if 2 Tories get elected for Lancashire, it's me and you. And if there's only one, it's going to be you. Unfortunately, he did get elected, only by a few hundred votes, but thank goodness, because the clip you're just going to play your viewers is something that I woke up to this morning, and I texted him immediately, and I said, well done. Starmer was like a startled rabbit without the headlights. It's simply because...
This is Andrew Snowden, ladies and gentlemen, basically asking the question, what the hell is the point of Prime Minister's Question Time anymore? Take it away.
Every week the Prime Minister comes here and reads out this pre-scripted nonsense that bears no resemblance to the questions he's actually asked. The Leader of the Opposition asked him about Peter Mandelson and he answered about the war in Iran. The Leader of the Opposition asked him about Mandelson again and he answered with an attack on the Shadow Justice Secretary. He was asked about Mandelson again and talked about protests in London. What is he scared of? What is he hiding? For a man who has spent years presenting himself as a forensic investigator, he has certainly had a blind spot to the details for this convicted paedophile with a friend in high Labour places. So I shall ask him again, when he found out that Lord Mandelson had an ongoing relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, did he speak to him personally before appointing him ambassador to the United States?
Mr. Speaker, we've set out the process. It is being put before the House. But I know why
they don't want to talk about the war because they supported going into the war without thinking through the consequences. That is a huge error of judgment. I realise they don't want to talk about it ever again. I'm not surprised. Nor do they want to talk about the Shadow Justice Secretary saying that Muslims are not welcome to prayer in Trafalgar Square. She should remove him from their front bench, or I suspect he'll be up there next on that trail.
So, as ever, he doesn't answer the question. He manages to bring reform into it. Great piece of parliamentary business, I thought, by Andrew Snowden. But it's caused many people, Nigel, to question what is the point of Prime Minister's Question Time. And somebody texted and said, why don't they all just stand up next week and walk out? Because this guy does not answer the questions. And as the Deputy Speaker, the ex-Deputy Speaker, do we not think that Lindsay Hoyle should be more robust in getting our leader to answer questions? That's my first question to you today.
Yeah, well, the reality is, I'm afraid the Speaker has not got the power. What he has got the power to do is to ensure that the Prime Minister turns up to answer questions. But as far as whether the Prime Minister basically answers honestly the question that he was just asked. And you did have a classic piece with Andrew Snowden there, because basically what he was saying is you were asked several times a specific question about Peter Mandelson and whether the Prime Minister spoke to him before he appointed him. The reality is that he never answered Kemi Badenoch's similar questions prior to Andrew asking his question. And Andrew thought on his feet. As you know, a lot of them stand up, they're holding a piece of paper and they can't deviate from it because they can't think. They can't chew and think at the same time. Andrew clearly demonstrated that he could, and basically telling him, you're not answering the question, to which then Keir came to the dispatch box and then proceeded not to even answer Andrew's question. The reality is, though, Jeremy, anybody watching that clip will know he's got something to hide. Mm-hmm. The reason that he's not answering the question is as important as if, quite frankly, he did answer the question, because we all know the reality is he did not speak personally to Peter Mandelson, otherwise he would have said so. I mean, it is very, very embarrassing.
Isn't it also quite interesting that he did say, Nigel, and you'd be more forensic than me, that Peter Mandelson lied to me? Well, if Peter Mandelson lied to him, hasn't he got to have lied to his face or told him in a lie rather than read it, which means he did speak to him, which is another lie?
Well, the reality is, it looks to me as if all the information we've got, it was Morgan McSweeney or one of those, was it Matt Doyle?
Matthew Doyle, yeah, ex-communications,
in the House of Lords. Those two happen to be friends of Peter Mandelson.
Yeah.
And it looks as if he has basically sublet the job of talking to Peter Mandelson, offering him the most important ambassadorial job in the world. And he made it sound as if he had spoken to him, but it looks to all intents and purposes that he basically got two of Mandelson's friends to talk to him. The reality is, Jeremy, and this is the most embarrassing thing for Starmer, is that he was determined to put Peter Mandelson into the job.
Wonder why.
We're hearing all sorts of information that the United States of America wanted Karen Pierce, the former British ambassador to Washington, to stay. Why? Because Trump had dealings with her, got on really well with her, and therefore he trusted her. Instead of which, even though Keir Starmer knew that that's what the Americans wanted, he was desperate to get Peter Mandelson in. And it didn't really matter, irrespective of what Peter Mandelson was going to say to Morgan McSweeney or Matt Doyle, he was going to put him in as ambassador. The buck stops with the Prime Minister. It's very embarrassing, but don't worry, there are going to be many other opportunities for Keir Starmer to be asked questions, either by the press, in the dwindling number of opportunities that the press are now getting to question Keir Starmer, or during the liaison committee when chairs of select committees will be able to drill down, and he won't be able to get away with it.
Oh, he doesn't like drilling. He doesn't like drilling. We can't have that. Can I just ask you a question? As the ex-Deputy Speaker, do you think that the way he behaves validates changes. I know that it used to be, somebody was telling me earlier, it was a Tuesday and a Thursday, 15 minutes, and then Tony Blair brought it into half an hour. One of the things that I would see changed massively is I don't see why the half an hour should be made up entirely of just the opposition leader. I think other parties should be allowed to ask a question. I also think, and I'd love your answer on this as a parliamentarian, I think it's a ludicrous waste of time for his own parties, loyal MPs who are trying to climb the greasy pole, answering an easy question that he can simply answer and look good. I think it should be him facing up to the things that matter to the country.
Yeah, but if you remember, it was only a couple of weeks ago that Kenny Badenoch asked him a question as to whether he knew before he appointed Peter Mandelson about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And he said yes. And do you remember there were gasps from within the chamber of the House of Commons, because this was the first time we actually got an idea that Starmer actually knew that there had been a relationship between Mandelson and Epstein. But of course, he hides behind this, I was lied to, I was lied to, I was lied to. Yeah, you were lied to, but you were prepared to be lied to because you simply wanted Mandelson in that job. You got Mandelson in that job, it's backfired, and the egg is all on his face. But not a single one of your viewers is going to be hoodwinked into thinking that simply by avoiding the question, by deflecting the answers onto whether it's the Iran war or the Justice Secretary, it's not going to wash. People know that the buck stops with Starmer, and he will pay a price.
Final question. You're brilliant. We love you. I'm sorry about the croissant or croissant, whatever you said in your French way. This appalling story doing the rounds this morning. Angela's jumped in and said, we need to let more migrants in. It's un-British being Labour right now. And Starmer's undoubtedly about to do a U-turn to placate her and the backbenches. This story this morning, Nige, just your response as a parliamentarian whose friendship I value. A Nigerian migrant who locked a girl in a flat in Manchester and sexually attacked her and then went on to rape a 19-year-old girl in Wrexham was yesterday allowed by a judge to stay in this country simply because he has a right to family life. I'd like to ask you where we've got to in a world where nobody gives a toss about the fact this girl's life will be blighted forever, and we're allowing an illegal criminal to get away with the most heinous act, and he's free to live amongst us. I don't understand it. I don't think questioning it is far right. I think it is perfectly acceptable for millions of balanced British people to go, what the hell has this country come to?
And British people have a right to go about their lives without the threat of being raped or attacked by anybody, never mind an illegal migrant into our country. And the reality is that if it is the European Convention of Human Rights that is the problem, we need to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. And I've come absolutely to that conclusion. We need to do so. This man needs to rot in jail, preferably rot in a Nigerian jail. We need to pick up the phone to the Nigerians and say we are sending this man who now we want to serve his prison sentence in a Nigerian jail, not in a cosy jail in the United Kingdom.
I've got news for you, though. We found a way to get him back. The King of Nigeria is on a 3-day state visit. I'd bung the bugger in the hold. I'd bung him in the hold of the Nigerian King's plane and get him out of this country.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a state visit by the Nigerian head of state. We need to sit him down. There's going to be a conversation between him and Starmer. Starmer will have every opportunity to say, we will pay, and it will be a fraction of the cost of putting him in a British jail, put him in a Nigerian jail, and this man must never step foot in the United Kingdom again. And quite frankly, we need to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. Anybody from abroad, I don't think even where they've been given leave to stay, if they commit a crime in this country, they need to be booted out of this country. And you've got the figures there. 60-odd thousand illegal immigrants have come into the UK since Starmer said, vote for me and I'll stop the boats. I think it's absolutely appalling. And it's heart-wrenching for people to read that story today when we know that we can prevent this sort of thing from happening.